Coach, so many questions about the run game going into this one, and it was a huge win. 345 total rush yards, right? But you lose Miyan, so how do you assess where you're at with your depth?
I think one of the things that's been our strength is our depth this year. You look at early on, it was the corners. We lost Jackson early on. We've had a couple guys hurt at running back. You saw Xavier step up. You saw Dallin play. So I think that's been one of our strengths this year is our depth.
So he's dead accurate about that. He mentioned the corner position, and I just brought out my chart just so that those of you that are watching this, you can see me. I've got my game chart out. Okay, so there's the Ohio State offense, and I'm just going to try to kind of like walk through the depth a little bit. And he's exactly right. So you come into the season, you think Treveyon Henderson is going to be your featured back, and he just can't stay healthy. He's been healthy at times, but can't stay healthy. You thought Miyan Williams was definitely going to be a clean number 2. He's had a hard time staying healthy. So then all of a sudden you're into Dallin Hayden, a freshman from Memphis. They've got other guys like T.C. Cappy. He was injured and he hasn't been available. They brought in a transfer from Arizona State to help him at linebacker, a thin position in the spring, Chip Trainum from Arizona State. And he also had running back in his history. So they brought him back over this last week to try to help with depth. He gets nicked up in practice. Xavier Johnson, who we mentioned, is in his 5th year in the program. And, it's just been, he's had a time at running back and wide receiver and corner. It's been one after the other. And so the depth has been affected at that running back position, as he was saying. But they are deep. And I thought that they answered the bell incredibly well. So I want to go through really quickly, here's the things that I know that they've answered over the course of the last couple of weeks, and maybe even specifically Saturday, and then maybe some questions that have popped up. Okay, so let's start with that. I was wondering on this show, and there were others around the country, we were wondering about Ohio State's running game and exactly how effective they were going to be, because while they were running the ball really effectively in the first 6 games, it had tailed off. Leading into Saturday's game, in the previous 3 for Ohio State, they were averaging 124 yards per game on the ground and about 4 yards per carry. Those sound average, good, not bad, right? Okay, what does that mean? Well, the problem is that in the first 6 games of the season, they were averaging 228 yards and 6 yards per carry. So it had fallen off drastically, and there was some cause for concern. And there was some concern within the fan base. I mean, guys like me, we were pointing it out about hey, they got to run the ball better. And you could tell really early in that game on Saturday that there was going to be a strong emphasis to have a quality day on the ground, right? And I love that about Ryan Day and this coaching staff is that they attack problems. And they clearly saw an area of their team that needed to be addressed last week, and they attacked it. And they came out and they were fantastic running the ball. I get it. It's against Indiana, but you don't control who you're playing. All you do is you control your own effort level and you control what you emphasize, because generally speaking in life, you achieve what you emphasize. And I could tell that they emphasized the run game. On Saturday, 340 rushing yards at just under 8 yards per carry. It was a dominant day on the ground. And dominant day overall, yes, but specifically on the ground. And you could tell right away, second series of the game, boom, they come out and they started really hammering with the run game. It wasn't just that, though. And I think that you could get that on any podcast or show in America. Hey, Ohio State, they came out and they wanted to run the ball better, and they did. Yeah, I get it. We all can look at the stat sheet. Let's dig deeper, though. What actually happened with Ohio State's run game? Well, the other thing that I love about Ryan Day and his coaching staff at Ohio State is that they don't just attack problems, but they address problems. And I think those are 2 different things. Okay, so you can attack something with energy and emphasis, but you address them when you actually face them with clear eyes. Okay, and you evaluate what's going on, and then you try to make a plan for how to make it better. They did that. Their run game changed on Saturday. Just a little bit, but there was a change. And the results were actually significant. Small change, significant result change. So what was that change? Well, going into the game, you heard me saying things like, hey, you know, this is a team that really relies on the wide stretch zone play, okay? And that was the case. And you looked at the numbers, and going into Saturday's game, that was easily the most prevalent run concept that you saw from Ohio State was the wide stretch zone. The inside zone and any sort of like man scheme or power scheme, gap scheme, those were less prevalent, okay? So then what happened on Saturday? It totally changed. Totally changed. Now, this is an offensive line that is really big, powerful, and I thought that on film they were better when they were moving forward rather than when they were moving side to side. And I said that on the broadcast. I mean, Paris Johnson at left tackle is 6'6", 310. Matt Jones, the left guard, the right guard is 6'4", 315. Donovan Jackson, 6'4", 300. Luke Whippler, 6'3", 300. DeJuan Jones, even though he didn't play Saturday, 6'8", 360 pounds. Josh Fryer came in and played right tackle. He's 6'6", 320. They are massive human beings. I thought on film they were better when they were moving forward rather than moving laterally. And part of the deal is like to really be effective at that stretch zone, you've got to have more athletic linemen that can get out, run, and then chop down at least one person in the defensive line to create a gap and then hit that gap. Okay, lots of technical speak to basically say they needed to get downhill more often. And they did that on Saturday. Really nice job of the coaching staff addressing that run game. And here are the numbers. They ran downhill runs. So I'm talking about inside zone, man scheme, power scheme, gap scheme, counter scheme, anything like that. They ran downhill runs 27 times and the outside stretch play only 13 times. So it totally changed. All right, they evaluated the scheme and it worked. Here are the numbers on those run plays. When they ran downhill in those 27 rushes, they ran for 240 yards at just under 9 yards per carry. They were dominant in those style of runs. And it's not that they ran the outside zone play poorly. They ran those 13 attempts for 87 yards, just over 6.5 per carry. But it was clear to me that they were better going downhill. Okay, so what does this tell you about this coaching staff and this run game moving forward? Well, let me just tell you a quick story about a conversation that I've had with Ryan Day throughout the years. He evaluates his program with clear eyes and I think as well as anybody in the country. And he says it's very clear to him. Anything that's going on in his program, he's going to evaluate it in 3 tiers. All right. Is it a personnel problem, the players? Is it a scheme problem? Or is it a coach problem? Okay. And he's going to evaluate each of those really well. And he does it time and time again. This is not the first time that they've addressed something in the middle of the season and really reaped the benefits because of that. Think about it. In the COVID year in 2020, they were not running the football all that well. They had Master Teague and Trey Sermon, the transfer from Oklahoma. They addressed the schematics of what they were doing. They put those 2 guys in the pistol because they felt like they were outrunning or running too quickly in terms of the phase of the run game. So they adjusted the formation and the style of run game that they had. And guess what? Trey Sermon all of a sudden went off in the tail end of that year. In fact, set an Ohio State single-game record in the Big Ten championship game. In 2021, last year, he had a defense that was clearly falling short of expectation, made a change with the coaching staff. Remember, Kerry Combs, he was now all of a sudden not the defensive play caller, and it all changed up. And then he changed up in the offseason and brought in a totally new defensive play caller and Jim Knowles, and that's worked out. He's constantly evaluating his program, and is it the personnel, is it the scheme, or is it the coach? And it's that sense of urgency that has really helped them. And I think it helped them on Saturday, and we'll see if that continues moving forward. Again, I think that this offensive line, this run game is better when they're moving downhill and not laterally side to side. Now, having said that, they do come out of Saturday's game with a couple more questions. And I do want to address those because the health of the running back room is going to be a source of I guess worry for those of you that are Ohio State fans. Miyan Williams goes down just before halftime. The good news is that I've seen on social media that he's actually said, like, hey, I'm good. Ryan Day said it doesn't look like it's long-term, and he does think that Treveyon Henderson is going to be back maybe as early as next week. So their running back room might be getting much healthier than what we saw certainly in the second half against Indiana on Saturday. My question would be, they've got 5 games left potentially. The last 4 are monsters, right? The game, a Big Ten championship game, and then potentially the playoff. So they're playing Maryland this week. I don't want to disparage Maryland, but do you think they could get by with Dallin Hayden and Xavier Johnson? Because, like, would you really, even if Treveyon was ready to go, would you really want to play Treveyon Henderson before the game? If his foot injury is as touch and go as it seems, and he's trying to get back, why wouldn't you maybe just suit up Treveyon Henderson and say, like, hey, if we need him, maybe we'll go to him, but let's see if we can get Dallin Hayden and Xavier Johnson up to speed. Maybe chip training can come back after tweaking something last week in practice. Like, maybe we can get by and get to the game, because health in the game is going to be much more important than anything else. So that's just something to pay attention to, is the depth. That's a question moving forward. And then another question, and this is one that I think is under the radar. Marvin Harrison is an unbelievable player. You've heard me say it. He's one of the best players I've ever covered. And as far as non-quarterbacks, I think he could be the best that I've ever broadcast. Non-quarterbacks. I said that and people went wild and they think it's hyperbole, but if you actually just like watch him, it's pretty unbelievable the way that he plays, in particular for a young player. Marvin Harrison right now, though, is he's shouldering way too much of the passing game. See, in the first 7 games, Marv was about 27% of the production throwing the football. But in the last 3, that's gone way up, 49%. Okay, so like Julian Fleming and Emeka Egbuka have got to start coming around a little bit. They were really good early in the season, in particular Egbuka, but Ibuka's only had, I think, 4 catches in the last couple of games. Fleming has struggled with drops. Those guys need to start stepping up, because I can tell you this, every defensive coordinator that's going to turn on the film for Ohio State and watch number 18, they're going to be like, we need to stop him. Every obvious passing situation, he's likely to be covered, I'd say 2 over 1, double covered, bracketed in some sense. He's not going to get single covered anymore. Okay, so if I know he's the best player on the field, the opposite defensive coordinator is going to know he's the best player on the field. And that's who you have to cover. If I know it, Michigan is absolutely going to know it. You think Jesse Minter isn't going to start rolling coverage to Marvin Harrison Jr. in obvious passing situations? He's 49% of the receiving production in the last 3 games. So they've got to start getting some production from Egbuka and Fleming, and maybe, just maybe, they could get Jackson Smith and Jigba back in time for that last game. So that's what I know, is that they've addressed the run game and they did it really successfully. And then those are the questions that still kind of popped up for Ohio State. Running back depth and then wide receiver production. Where do they go with Marv shouldering too much of the load, at least in the last 3?
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here. College football on Fox.